Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight Show, folks, and this is Tony. And don't forget, our website is aminutomidnight.com with midnight spelled M-I-D-N-I-T-E, and we run it entirely by donations, so thanks to people that help us out. And in this show, I have the return of John Haller, whom I always love having on the show, and this is a very, very interesting discussion. I hope you enjoy it. I want to say a very warm welcome to John Haller back on the A Minute to Midnight Show. We have John on quite regularly, and I know our listeners always love it when you come on, John, because you're such a wealth of knowledge and you present it in such a great way. So it's really good to be talking to you again today.
Good to be back, Tony.
And we've got a lot to talk about, some crazy times going on, and I guess we're going to start with the shenanigans happening in the US and the political scene.
Well, as in case there are people that are not that familiar with U.S. politics, I think U.S. politics is kind of a microcosm right now of the conflict worldwide between the left and the right, and it's really reached a level that I don't think I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I wouldn't call myself a political junkie, but it's something that I've always followed being a lawyer. But what we're seeing going on right now with the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to be a Supreme Court justice has just completely unraveled our system. Now, I personally think that what's going on is prophetic in the sense and relates to prophecy, in the sense that one of the indicators, harbingers, if you will, of the end times is worldwide conflict. And that conflict, it's going to operate in families, it's going to operate in churches, in politics, in culture, in geopolitics around the world with, the usual wars and rumors of wars. So what you see, you get these little snippets of the conflict that's going on. And so a good example right now is American politics. Now, our president, Donald Trump, has certainly he's a bomb thrower is the best way to say it. He's a New Yorker. If you've spent a lot of time in New York, this is not what you get with every New Yorker, but it's what you get with more than your fair share. When I was a young lawyer, I had to go to New York to do a deposition at Rockefeller Center. I had ordered a court reporter, and the person who was producing the witness had ordered a court reporter. The one court reporter was this little lady from Queens who had to be in her late 80s. She was a writer. She took shorthand. She had a steno pad, a fountain pen, and an inkwell there. And she was not going to leave that deposition. She was going to get the money. And I mean, she and the other court reporter almost came to fisticuffs. So aside from the entertainment of watching an 88-year-old lady get in the face of a 35-year-old lady, it was sort of indicative of how things operate in New York City. And Trump is brash, and he does things a lot of times. And frankly, I'm not always comfortable with what he does. I agree with a lot of his policies, but to be honest with you, Tony, I've not been able to figure out what his ultimate orientation is.
I think a lot of people are in that boat.
But Trump, there are things that he does that are sort of oriented towards American interest. A lot of things he does. But then, today I'm looking and they're threatening to take out Russian missile systems or cruise missile systems and that sort of thing, which would play more into a globalist agenda. So in my view, and I know this doesn't make you popular with a lot of people in America, is, for me, the jury is still out on the way that this is going to go. So a few months ago, Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh, who sits on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, to replace Anthony Kennedy. Kennedy's long been the swing vote. Kennedy has voted in favor of some of the abortion, allowing abortion to become more prevalent. He's voted with the left-leaning majority to allow to do away with restrictions on abortion that people have put in. And by the way, that the original Roe versus Wade decision in 1973 invited. We think that Congress and everybody in states are going to be able to regulate different trimesters. Well, that has effectively come and gone. And part of that is due to the influence in the swing vote of Anthony Kennedy. And Kennedy was appointed by a Republican. So people would have thought that he would have been in favor of restrictions on abortion, and that didn't pan out. Well, the Democrats, of course, and there's an increasing influence in the Democratic Party of leftists. Everything has become unhinged. Now, I also want to sort of preface my remarks on this as well, is that one of the things that we've always had a lot of controversy in the Bible prophecy community about is the identity of and structure of this final beast empire. Is it going to be oriented towards Roman Catholicism? Is it going to be oriented towards a European flavor? Is it going to be oriented towards Islam? And my conclusion, as I've kind of watched everything unfold over the last 25 years that I've been talking and teaching on this, is that the answer to those questions is yes. It's probably going to be a combination of all of them. And then the question becomes is where does the head of this final end-time government reside? And there are a number of different options. Everybody has their own pet theory. I'm sort of taking an open-ended approach to it and say, let's just watch and see how things unfold and come together. Because as I watch geopolitics quite intently and have for decades now, the one thing that seems to happen is that things change, and especially within the last few years, things change very rapidly. But one of the things I think I find more intriguing, it actually comes from someone from down your way, Trevor Loudon, and his work that he's been doing on the Red-Green Alliance. Yeah. And I think his work is excellent. It's compelling. And I think that's where it's going. And red meaning left, communist, socialist, and green, of course, would be Islamic. And you see this kind of unity on that side of the aisle, that among those people. And of course, then you throw in the New World Order and the globalists and all that into the mix. But I do think I think it's indicative of what's happening. So Brett Kavanaugh he's on the most influential Circuit Court of Appeals in the United States. He's been a judge. He was a lawyer in the Bush White House. He was on Ken Starr's team that investigated the Clinton back in the 90s, that investigated the Clintons over Whitewater. I saw a picture today of Kavanaugh on Air Force One with Bill Clinton before he started investigating him. He's worked with a lot of different people.
Yeah, well, that's sorry to interrupt, but that's interesting considering Hillary Clinton's recently, out there basically claiming that Trump is throwing his support behind white nationalists and white supremacists. Speaking of Judge Kavanaugh, so there's vested interest then, isn't there? I didn't know that about what you've just told me, so that makes some sense as to why Hillary Clinton would be so vehemently against it.
Yeah, he was one of the main people on Ken Starr's team that investigated and eventually led to Bill Clinton's impeachment over perjury that he committed in a deposition about Monica Lewinsky. The person who would have prepared a lot of those questions and examination questions would have been Brett Kavanaugh.
Interesting.
he was an integral, and maybe next to Ken Starr, probably I think probably about the most important part of that team. He was in the Bush administration as well. There's some, he was in the Office of White House Counsel. It's also believed that he was involved. I haven't been able to confirm this, so don't take this as gospel truth. That when after the 9/11 attacks, that he would have been one of the people that was involved with drafting the Patriot Act that led to curbs. Well, it increased the ability of the government to do surveillance. And so, here we sit 17 years later, and look at the surveillance society that we have. By the way, I did a thing on that in my prophecy update at Fellowship Bible Chapel a couple of weeks ago. There's a very good video that was done by, I think it's Australian Broadcasting Company, ABC, on the surveillance society in China.
And
it's just, I'm sure you've seen it. It's insane. I mean, and China now has, I don't know, several hundred million surveillance cameras placed around China, and they're talking about it adding 450 million cameras in the next short period of time.
Yeah, I know, and this is the thing, and the people live under that and somehow think it's okay, think it's normal. It's just like, they've been so indoctrinated for so long, and it is just awful. And then, of course, with the crackdown on Christians in China and all that as well, and we haven't really got time. We haven't really got time to talk.
I'm going to talk a little bit about that on this upcoming Sunday about what's going on with Christians in China. So back to Brett Kavanaugh. So Kavanaugh is, his background is he grew up in a fairly well-off suburb of Washington, D.C. His mother was a judge. He went to Georgetown Prep, which is sort of, you would call it an elite Jesuit Catholic high school, all boys. He eventually graduated from Yale Law School. And by most estimates, he's been a fairly good judge. Now, I'm not convinced that with the way American judicial appointments work, the president gets to appoint, and then the Senate gets to do advise and consent. And so as long as he gets a majority approval from the Senate, he'll be on the Supreme Court for life. He could be impeached. There have only been probably less than 5 judges impeached. We have in the federal system, we have a district court, we have a court of appeals, and then we have the Supreme Court. I think at all levels, I believe that only between 3 and 5 judges have been impeached in the history of the United States. They're impeached in very much the same way that the president would be impeached. The House of Representatives would vote. If there's a majority that say that he should be impeached, this is what happened with President Clinton. They said he should be impeached. He committed high crimes and misdemeanors, and then it goes to the Senate for a trial, and they vote. It works in a similar fashion with a judge at the district court level, or at the Court of Appeals or Supreme Court levels. And I bring that up because this is where this is going, even if Kavanaugh gets appointed. But I will say that these judges are appointed for life. You try to do the best you can, but one thing that can be certain is that the judges some judges will disappoint you that you appoint. Now, I will say that this is one thing that I think Trump has done a good job on so far, is appointing judges, and he's appointed a huge number of judges in just the time that in the 18, 19 months, 20 months that he's been in office. It's at a rate that I don't think is unmatched in American history. So he is putting in place pretty good constitutionalist, originalist judges that believe that the Constitution actually means things, as opposed to the left-leaning judges who say, well, the Constitution means whatever we think it means on a particular day. And there's a real battle, and the court's been very closely divided. But I do have concerns with his background, the Jesuit Catholic upbringing,
Yes.
Yale Law School,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And so it's a bit of a crapshoot with any justice that you appoint. And he may be another Scalia, but he could be another Kennedy. We just don't know. I mean, I think Justice Roberts has been, to a lot of conservatives, he has been somewhat of a disappointment. He sort of makes political decisions as opposed to constitutionalist decisions. So but now the fight is on, and people are concerned, and it boils down to a concern over overturning Roe versus Wade. And the knives are out, and they are going after Kavanaugh. Now, what's interesting about that is that the confirmation process is overlapping the midterm elections, midterm being the middle of Trump's first term. So every 2 years, everybody in the House of Representatives stands for election, and roughly 1/3 of the Senate. So the question now is, everybody's trying to jockey for position. The division in the Senate and the House is very close. It's Republican majorities, but they're very tenuous because some of the Republicans might as well go and sit on the other side of the aisle, given the way that they vote. So, and this is being fought. I live in a congressional district that is generally considered in Ohio and nationwide one of the most important swing districts in the country. Ohio generally how Ohio goes, so goes the presidency, they say in many instances. And that's held true through many years, many elections. And in my district, which is fairly conservative, has been fairly conservative. We had our congressman resign. We had a special election a few months ago to replace him, and it was decided by just a few hundred votes because most of the Republicans just didn't come out and vote, and the Democrats did. So a lot of these congressional district races right now are very close, and how these Kavanaugh hearings go is important to that process. So it's chaos. So Kavanaugh's appointed, just about ready to have the committee vote, and then Dianne Feinstein, who's I think she's running for re-election in California in November, in just a month, 4 weeks, I guess. She brings out these allegations from this psychology professor from the University of Palo Alto that she was sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh.
You're talking about Christine Ford, is it?
Christine Ford,
Yeah.
Yeah, Christine Baisley Ford, or whatever her name is. And so they had, so everything got put off a week, and she testified last Thursday, and then they were supposed to do an FBI investigation. Now I'm hearing that the FBI investigation could be coming out at least the initial report could be released anytime soon. She's not really cooperating, and Dr. Ford is not really cooperating. They've asked for some of her therapy notes. So to boil it down, my view of the whole thing is, look, I'm a trial lawyer. I've taken hundreds of depositions. I've investigated hundreds of cases. I was a graduate assistant when I was getting my master's in criminology, over 40 years ago. But the professor that I worked for was a polygraph expert. So I'm familiar with the issues, and in some of the investigations that I've done, recovered memories have come up. And my suspicion is that what happened was that this never surfaced when Kavanaugh Court of Appeals 13 years ago. It just came up, and supposedly she remembered it in 2012. It came up in some therapy, and I'm pretty sure, I think the evidence has borne this out, that she went through some kind of recovered memory therapy. This is highly unreliable. If it was in a court of law it would be torn to shreds. It's not reliable. And now, word is coming out that she's written papers on this, and she lived for a time before she was married with a lady, a friend of hers, who was an attorney and was a deputy to Robert Mueller, who is the former FBI director who's been investigating Trump over the Russian collusion matter, and special counsel. And there's some suspicion now that this former FBI special counsel or attorney at the FBI helped her craft the statement that she read and testified from last week. Now, having looked at and been through some training on body language and watching that, I have no doubt in my mind that her testimony has no credibility.
Well, she's provided no real details of where the supposed party was, how she got there, how she got home, doesn't remember any of it, doesn't have a date, nothing. So it's like...
Another question I have is, does anybody ever drink more than one beer? Because she said she had one beer.
Right.
I mean, nobody ever has, whenever this comes up, nobody ever has more than one beer.
Yeah.
And I'm not a beer drinker. I've never been, but I've been around people and they don't drink one beer.
Yeah.
As a general rule.
No.
So her testimony is just not, in my view, credible. There's been some other allegations that have come up. Today it's reached the point of silliness that I think it was Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut was bringing up the fact that at a bar once, Kavanaugh had thrown some ice in the face of someone when he was in college.
I mean, yeah.
And I mean, Richard Blumenthal, who lied for 15 years about serving in Vietnam when he never got anywhere close to the place. So it's just...
and there's at least one or two other women with supposed claims against him too. One, I think, Julie Swetnick, is that the woman's name? Claims that he gang raped or whatever, and again, it's just nothing to really substantiate it.
No, it's made up. Her attorney is this Michael Avenatti, who claims he's going to run for president. He has all kinds of tax problems, and he represented the porn star stripper Stormy Daniels,
right,
in connection with some, I guess, hush money that she was paid by Trump prior to the election, and she clearly violated the agreement. But he's a lowlife. He's a bottom dweller, bottom feeder. And he represents the Swetnick lady. And then this other person, she really hasn't come up. He supposedly exposed herself. Kavanaugh exposed himself to her at a party in a dorm at Yale University back when they were students. But the whole thing is just mass chaos. And of course, people are out there. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
I'm in my 60s. I hope I never see anything like it again, but I'm afraid that we're past the tipping point in America. And trust me, I don't know what politics is like down your way. I know that it's pretty contentious in Australia. It's pretty contentious in the United Kingdom, Great Britain. It's in Europe. It's chaos everywhere. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah.
And I think this is a prophetic this is prophecy outplaying, just like we were told that it was going to be. There's tremendous division everywhere in the world.
And I find it really interesting. Well, it's not coincidence. It's prophecy being fulfilled, but it also goes well and truly in line with the Hegelian dialectic and the Illuminists' idea of ordo ab chaos, or order out of chaos. So, you forming all kinds of stuff going on at both ends, the left and the right, to end up being able to bring what you want out of it. So you pit one against the other, and I think this is to create the chaos, a thesis and an antithesis so they can bring the synthesis. So I kind of watch all of these things going on, and I don't think it's just random. I think it's orchestrated, that there are people pulling strings that want to cause the chaos, and they work both sides.
Yeah, they do work both sides to some degree. I think they get more activism from the left. They're posting congressmen home addresses on websites. There was a professor, she's an interesting study. Her name is Christine Fair, which is kind of, again, sort of like Jeff Flake is appropriately named, the senator from Arizona who kind of caved in on the investigation. I don't think there's ever been a senator who had a better name for sort of how his politics run. And now there's this professor at Georgetown, a professor of security studies named Christine Fair. And on her Twitter account, which was suspended for a short time this week, because even Twitter couldn't tolerate what she said, but then she's been restored, is a picture of a Trump with the body of a swine, with Vladimir Putin sitting on top of him, riding him and directing him. Now, she put out a tweet the other day about privileged white men, and what they should do is we should kill them and then castrate their dead bodies and feed what we castrate to swine.
Wow.
And she's a professor of security studies at Georgetown. She's a contributor she's contributed to Foreign Policy, Council on Foreign Relations, and she's an expert on Pakistani and Middle East. She has a book on political Islam. And again, I think this plays right into the Trevor Loudon theory, if you will, about the Red-Green Alliance. But she's just sort of representative of being unhinged. I've looked at, there's some emergent church types. They claim to be evangelicals. They're very postmodern in their orientation. One is a lady named Rachel Held Evans. She's got a new book out called Inspired that talks about scripture, but she describes herself as a doubt-filled believer. But so when it comes to the Bible and God and Jesus, she's full of doubt. But she believes this Dr. Ford.
Wow.
That she's certain about.
Yeah.
And this shows where it's going. I first talked on the effect of postmodernism at a conference in California back in 2001, just literally 5 or 6 weeks before 9/11 happened. And I said this was going to destroy the evangelical church. And while I don't claim to be a prophet, I think I got that one right.
Yeah.
You could see it coming. You could see its influence in politics. I don't know if I've mentioned this on your show. I'm a trial lawyer. When I was a young trial lawyer, all the trial lawyer, how to be a good trial lawyer seminars would tell you how to effectively present facts, how to be a good presenter of truth. I don't know when it changed. It was probably sometime in the 90s, 20, 25 years ago, if not before that. It started to shift where all of the trial lawyer seminars were about how do you appeal to the emotions of the jurors.
Yeah, you have actually mentioned this on our show before. That's really, really interesting. And that you can kind of pinpoint a period of time where it sort of changed.
Well, and it's frightening too, because, I've was involved in a very large criminal fraud trial that involved securities fraud and mail fraud, wire fraud. And I'm talking in the billions of dollars. And, you think about putting your fate in the hands of a bunch of people that are only moved by emotions. But this is what we have. You can see that playing out in everything on the Democratic side of the aisle in the Kavanaugh hearings.
Yeah, it's all based on whipping up of emotion. And the thing is that the media is so complicit in it. You know, they will present things without even checking for facts, like smear campaigns and character assassination, including that one with Christine Ford, I believe, you know, where that. Like the Washington Post comes out with an article basically without proper research or anything, and they use it to, you know, sway public opinion so much. And it's what's happening in the media everywhere, not just in America, of course, but it's just, you know, you can't trust any of it.
Well, and there's also the extremely short news cycle. Sitting back and actually pondering things and giving them some thought is just not, it's frowned upon in today's culture. I mean, I get pressure from people, you know, like, okay, we like, you know, how you sort of analyze news and everything. Could you do it more than once a week? And I've thought about that. One, it's hard enough to keep up to do it once a week. And secondly, I do want to think things through a little bit because things are not always initially what they appear to be. And so I'm concerned, especially in the Bible prophecy community, that I don't know how many times I've seen, and I watch other people too, because I want to make sure that I'm not sort of hanging out there on a crazy fringe on something. So I watch other people to temper myself. But how many times have I seen people running around predicting martial law is going to happen next week? They're having these military exercises. Somebody sees a train of tanks being moved. And, you know, World War III is happening. The UN troops are going to take over America next week.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And World War III is going to happen because the Saudis are having a military exercise with some other Arab country.
Yeah.
Now, it could break out that it could actually happen that way, but it could be a very something that doesn't seem that important. Historically, we know that this has happened. World War I got kicked off because of the assassination in Sarajevo of the crown prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or I think that's who it was. And so, but who knew that was going to lead to a world war? I mean, everything was in place for that, and I think a lot of things are in place for that right now. And it just, what's going to happen? Is it going to be somebody shooting down the wrong plane in Syria? Now, we saw a Russian plane get shot down. 15 Russian soldiers were killed. And it hasn't led to an immediate war. There's some things that are escalating, certainly, with Russia moving, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So all of these things are very volatile, but there's this extremely short news cycle. If you can't cover it on Twitter in 15 minutes, the fear is after it happens that you're irrelevant. And the mainstream media in America is really trying to figure out how to deal with this. And I'll be honest with you, I get a lot of my ideas from Facebook and Twitter. But I have a broad range of people that I follow on Twitter. I follow some IDF people. I follow American military. I follow people that I don't agree with. I follow Syrian, what I think would be Syrian propaganda outlets. I follow, I follow Russia propaganda outlets. And you always have to put a filter on all of them. You sort of have to understand their orientation and where they're coming from. So, from the Israeli IDF people, I know that, they're very proud of Israel. They're proud of their military, and some of their stuff is going to be colored that way.
Yes.
Others, I know they're lying from the outset, or that their whole orientation is towards lying. So the media here in America, though, is this attack on Kavanaugh, who, like I said, I'm not sure if I was sitting in Trump's chair that he would have been my first choice. I I'm very concerned about the makeup on the Supreme Court. All 9 justices went to Yale or Harvard. Now,
Yeah.
look, they're good schools. I work with lawyers that went to Yale or Harvard. I will say this, I think, without reservation. They're not really all that much smarter than the rest of us.
Mm.
I mean, but they have a very powerful network, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Gorsuch's religious orientation, but 4 of the justices are Roman Catholic, and 4 are Jewish.
Yeah.
And Kavanaugh is a Catholic Jesuit trained,
And that is a concern, the whole Jesuit association. I think you're seeing that with Trump's administration. And, so many Council on Foreign Relations people and so on as well. I just want to sort of change tack a little bit, but sort of not completely changing direction. But let's, realize that there is a plan going on globally to bring in a global sort of system, and Trump seems to be ostensibly against it. But again, I look back to the whole, what I mentioned before in the Hegelian dialectic, and you pit the two sides one against the other to create this synthesis antithesis sort of situation. So you bring a thesis and antithesis, and then you bring the synthesis in the middle. And I look at all these things going on, and I think it's just like a sort of a big game. I think there's some planning behind it. And we had the United Nations meeting recently, and I'm just looking at even our Prime Minister from New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, who arose from pretty much nowhere. She received a Freemasons scholarship, which immediately I think is suspect, and she's been groomed for the job. But her
debut... She the one, she just had a baby not too long ago?
Yeah, that's her. Right? But, I mean, she used her debut speech at the United Nations General Assembly to basically challenge Donald Trump's viewpoint of things and present a globalist kind of new... She even used the word new world that is strong and kind and with universal values and so on and so forth. And just a little piece of her speech, she said, while that impact has been positive for many, for others it has not, the transitions of our economies have often been jarring and the consequences harsh. And so amongst unprecedented global economic growth, we have still seen a sense of isolation, dislocation, and a sense of insecurity and the erosion of hope. And then she pretty much used that to attack sort of Trump's nationalistic ideas, and presenting a kind of a global, we're all global citizens or planetary citizens type of argument. And you're seeing that from all kind of different areas. And, of course, her speech was after Trump's already delivered his one.
Well, Emmanuel Macron came in and said essentially the same thing that your prime minister did.
Yeah, and it's just setting the world, for this globalist planetary citizen type of thing. And then you mentioned China, which we won't go into, with their surveillance system and all that. And it's so easy to see it being implemented everywhere eventually. And, it's just... we are seeing Bible prophecy unfold, that's for sure. But I think there's a lot of orchestration.
There is this, and I've said this before, that I'm not big on conspiracy theories. I do believe that there are people that are pushing for this one world order. I just don't think, they've been at it for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And you could look at the length of time that it's taken them to get things in place, and you could say, well, they're just not very good at it. They sure want it, but they're not very good at it. And they make inroads in this, but I have to tell you, the rise of social media and the control that some of these giant tech companies have. I mean, if it was designed this way, it was a very clever way for the elites of the world to get governments to outsource censorship and control.
Yeah.
We talked about this the last time we got together.
Yeah.
I just noticed last week all of my prophecy updates have now been put in restricted mode on YouTube.
Yeah, and it's happening all over the place. And I noticed this week that PayPal has now basically told Alex Jones and InfoWars they've got to get off the PayPal platform. So everyone's throttling InfoWars from all directions.
Well, it's worse than that. I mean, MasterCard and Visa have also cut off Jones, and for a time they cut off Robert Spencer at Jihad Watch and some other conservative organizations. And what they've done, in fact, this kind of goes back to this doctor that I talked about, this professor at Georgetown in security studies. A lot of this has come through universities as well. In fact, I was just reviewing a speech by a guy named Carlin. Now, he works for a very large law firm, Morrison Forrester, MoFo, we kind of call it. It's a huge law firm, and he's a partner there now, but he was a deputy attorney general, one of the top people in the Department of Justice. And there's a speech that he gave at Georgetown. I believe it was in 2014 at a security conference. Now, it was not at Georgetown. It was at George Washington University, which is a Catholic Jesuit university that actually, when Obama came, covered up the symbol for Jesus in the thing in their chapel or the auditorium where Obama was speaking. They later had, I think that was George Washington, they later had this conference, and it talked about the partnership that had been formed in the Obama administration between the Department of Justice and identifying extremists, which were not Islamic extremists. They were extremists that people like you and I would fit this definition. Yeah. And the outside agency that the Department of Justice was partnering with was the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is neither law nor poverty. They have hundreds of millions of dollars in bank accounts around the world, and they are probably the worst hate group, and they identify a lot of good conservative Christian thinkers and other organizations as hate groups. And so because they're identifying people as hate groups, MasterCard is now using their identification as a reason to cut off the credit card payments for somebody like an Alex Jones or a Robert Spencer. Now, they get away with it. I mean, and we supposedly have this administration that's in charge. I'm like, who is running anything?
Yeah, and I know you say, you're not big on conspiracy theory, but I often go back to the Illuminati's original 7-part plan, and I don't have it sitting in front of me. But I see all of those things actually happening today. Yeah, it's taken them 200 years and a bit to get there.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that, and part of this too is, God will let it happen when it's time.
Yes,
and I
exactly.
think that we're getting very close to that time.
Yeah.
If not already in it.
Okay, so now as our time is racing on, we would mention the United Nations and so on. And what about Donald Trump and his two-state solutions speeches? And I noticed that Edward Sarsell from True News actually managed to get Trump's attention in a conference, and Trump basically spent 5 minutes outlining it to pretty much silence and made in pretty much no doubt that he's very much in favor of a two-state solution. And, of course, we got the peace plan being supposedly released within the next 2 or 3 months. What are your thoughts on it all?
Well, certainly I think that this gets us into the Daniel 9 prophecy about what the English translation says, confirm a covenant. I'm not sure that that's a good translation, and this thing can come about in a number of ways. When they adopted a UN resolution after the 2016 election, and the United States refused to veto it at the Security Council. It was really sort of against Israel and the settlements. At that time, my speculation was that maybe this whole thing is something that's forced on Israel. It could be something that somebody would consider spectacular that comes out. It could be a confirmation of an existing plan. I mean, which there is a handful. There's Oslo, there's Wye River, there's the Quartet plan. They're all sort of the same. Everybody talks about a two-state solution, and I think the hope was in the evangelical community that Trump would at least put a stop to this. And he hasn't.
No, he's accelerated it, if anything.
Well, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is a very interesting guy. And Kushner has gone against intelligence people here in the United States, the intelligence agencies, the foreign policy establishment. What he wanted to do is he wanted Trump's first foreign visit, which took place in May, a year ago, May 2017, to be to Saudi Arabia. And that the person they would focus on in that would be, at the time, the deputy crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and the intelligence people, the military. He's just the deputy crown prince. And Kushner said, yeah, but, well, look who's really in charge of Saudi Arabia now and what's happened. And it's MBS. It's
Yes.
Mohammed bin Salman. So Kushner's been very influential. I will give Trump credit in that he has pretty much discredited the Palestinian enterprise. He's cut off their funding. He's isolated them. I don't think the Arab countries really care that much. Well, they don't care about the Palestinians. There's Palestinian refugee camps that still exist after 70 years in Syria and Jordan and other places. When I was in Israel a year ago, May, I was actually there during Trump's visit, and we were up. We went up into what's called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. We were up in Nablus. And you go on Mount Gerizim, where the Samaritans still live and have their places of worship, where the Samaritan woman at the well with Jesus would have pointed that we worship in that mountain right there. You can see it from Jacob's well, and you look down and there's this very densely populated section of Nablus, and it's a refugee camp, and the people live in squalor where a lot of people around them it's decent neighborhoods that, you would be okay to live with in middle class America. In fact, by the way, when you stand on Mount Gerizim, if you look to the north a little bit, you will see this massive mansion. It is almost, it's a sort of based on some of the Italian villas. It sits on top of this mountain about, a couple miles, less than 2 miles from the center of Nablus. And it's this multi-billionaire Palestinian guy that built it. I mean, I think his name is Al-Mari or something like that. And he was Yasser Arafat's main funder. And then just down the hill, there are people living in squalor that have been kept in these refugee camps for 70 years. So Trump has sort of, I think, been clever the way they've attacked the funding of the Palestinian enterprise. I think the two-state solution is prophetically, I think it's something that is, I don't know if it's going to be tried for a time or something is going to be done, in my view, that's going to deal with the Palestinian issue. I think Israel has kind of lost their tolerance. A Facebook friend of mine, who I had not met, I hope to meet him on our next trip to Israel, Ari Fold, was stabbed and killed at Gush Etzion Junction. I've been there. I was just there last year. He was at a shopping mall talking on his phone, and a Palestinian guy stabbed him in the back and killed him. 45-year-old guy, a guy who I think sort of epitomized the Zionist, love Israel, we're glad we're back, God called us back here movement. If you would ask me one person that in Israel that epitomized that spirit, it would have been Ari Fold. and he was killed. 4 children, a huge tragedy. At some point, I think Israel loses patience with this. But everybody, including Trump, seems to be going down the two-state solution path. Now, how does that look? I don't know. I can tell you that it would be absolute, having been there and gone up through the Central Highlands, which comprise the West Bank, you can't give up the high ground. I mean, it would be a disaster. You cannot let people there that hate you have a military. It's not going to work.
Mm.
But somebody thinks they're going to get the plan. Now, what are the triggers for that? Is there Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, Ezekiel 38, a combination of all of them? Yeah, I think all those things are going to happen. We just don't know exactly how or when they're going to play out. But things are very volatile there. You know, we have Russia moving their S-300 system into Syria.
Yes.
Now, I think that's partly propagandistic. Look, I don't have a high view of Russia. I think they have a lot of holdovers from the Soviet era.
Yep.
They were the master deceivers. They have infiltrated at every level in American politics, American government, education system, Catholic Church, the way the whole, I think the whole crisis in the Catholic Church with predators and homosexuality among priests and that type of thing, I think a lot of that was fomented by the Soviet Union back in the 1920s. So they put this S-300 up there. We're going to control all the airspace. Look, Israel, Greece has an S-300 system. Israel has a good relationship with Greece. And I'm pretty sure that Israel has been in there tearing apart an S-300 system, and they know exactly what it means. I will remind you of this. In 2000, I can't remember if it was 2007, they destroyed that Syrian reactor. Syria had just put in place at that time the North Korean reactor that was built in Syria, not too far from Raqqa, the Islamic State capital for a short time. Israel destroyed that. They sent 2 jets. They were never fired on. Syria had just installed the most advanced Russian air defense system before that happened, and Israel knew how to make it blind. So I'm not really that concerned that it's going to stop Israel from, hitting the Iranian targets. But it's one of these things: is how many planes is Russia going to allow to be shot down?
Well, yeah, that's it. They really haven't done a heck of a lot, apart from a lot of words after that other one, was shot down, in terms of they haven't retaliated really, apart from sending that S-300 system. But a lot of people thought, this will be it. But, again, it's gone quiet.
I was going to say one other development recently was you can see some videos of it that are online. Russia recently did some testing of its hypersonic missiles. Now, they've had some issues with them, but they did a test of 8 missiles the other day, about a week ago, and they were successful. And there's some video of that online that you can see. And this is, if this is true, this is a game changer in the world of defense. And I hope we have some space-based lasers or something to shoot them down, because this will make our aircraft carriers, and our Navy is, aircraft carrier centric. I think we have more aircraft carriers than just about the rest of the world combined.
Yeah.
Russia has one that doesn't really work very well. I think it has tugboats that accompany it pretty much everywhere because it breaks down a lot. But these hypersonic missiles, one of those can take out, these things fly at Mach 8, 8 times the speed of sound, and they can take out an aircraft carrier, one missile.
Yeah.
That's a game changer. Russia has done a very good job of developing some tactical nukes and other things. And I think that the this development, their sort of foray into Syria and that type of thing, is a real game changer geopolitically, because while they don't have a huge economy, they have about an economy about the size of the state of Texas. Um, they have developed some very good weapons systems. We all have our biases, and I
Yeah.
like America. It's been a good place, and I am an American, but I think we get a little bit blinded by our patriotism sometimes, and
Yeah.
I am very concerned about the state of the American military. I do not think we've been stretched thin by these foreign wars, and we haven't really won anything. We haven't really
Yeah.
resolved it. We spent trillions of dollars, borrowed trillions of dollars to do it, if you will. Um,
The
and
other
I just
thing
think,
is, you mentioned the Russian economy, and we haven't really got time because to get into it, because we're nearly coming up to an hour already. But I've been really taking a lot of note at the fact that Russia has been seeming to go hell for leather to accumulate gold, and especially this year they've
as
really
has
got,
China,
yeah.
China as well.
And that people need to realize that's that's significant. Uh, they're not doing it just for the sake of it. That there's a plan afoot, and Russia has certainly been really going for it this year. Well, they have for a few years, but this year, I think in particular, they've just accumulated masses of gold, and so there is a reason behind that. And the people that live thinking the US dollar is going to be the global world reserve currency forever, it's not. And all of these things are significant things to watch. What some sort of maybe final things that you want to really bring across to people about what's going on?
Well, I think that one of the things that we need to always be cognizant of is that if this is in fact the end times, things will change very rapidly. We will continue to see a convergence of all of these various political sides. Of course, I believe Israel is the centerpiece of that. I think that's sort of the place that you look first. But I also spend a lot of time looking at what's going on in the church and culture. I see tremendous left, Marxist, neo Marxist, whatever you want to call it, influence in the evangelical church in America and around the world, the erosion of standards, the attacks on scripture. All of these things are clearly laid out as harbingers of that we live in the last days. And I just see them accelerating. And there's also we've never really talked about the economic aspect. I represent banks and everything, and I can tell you that people are in the banking industry in America are very nervous for the way things are going. It's rapid change. Retail is getting hammered. Big box stores, we built so much in America, and now a lot of them are empty. The shift to Amazon, I mean, it's extremely volatile. And as you sit there and try to think, like, what do I do? I think you just need to be grounded in the Word, know that this is what's coming, be out there sharing the gospel, knowing that things could change very, very quickly. Um, it, you know, what's it going to take? Is it one EMP attack in America? Is it um, I mean,
None of us really knows, but I think we've all got the sense that something is coming and it's going to
yeah,
change our world forever, and and that's inevitable. We don't know exactly how or when, but it's coming, and I don't think
yeah.
it's too far away. I'm not saying it's coming next week or next month or necessarily even in the next year, but I think being prepared for it is important.
I do think that next year will be. It's important to be very watchful over the next year. But listen, we see a crackdown on people in China. I have friends who go into Kurdish, other areas of the Middle East where they've never seen a Christian before, and people are going in there and sharing the gospel, and people are coming to know the Lord. In the face of tremendous persecution. So But God will use this in a mighty way. And the scripture always says, don't fear him who can kill the body. Fear God who can destroy both body and soul.
Interesting. I was just reading that this morning.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about it because listen, I'm all for a comfortable life and not wanting to go through these things, and I don't want to go through persecution or anything. And all I can say is that we need to be prepared for that this may be what God will do with us, what he did with the early church and what he's done with the church in history. Listen, more Christians are dying for their faith now than at any time in the history of the church.
Yeah.
And it's, I won't see it. It's always great we can talk about what's going to happen in 100 years because we know we won't be around. But the demographic changes that are taking place in the world, immigration and that sort of thing, Venezuela collapses, they're shutting borders there. Nicaragua is collapsing. Costa Rica is shutting its border. I mean, it's everywhere you look. There are these massive social changes. South Africa, I get emails from my friends in South Africa, Zimbabwe, or the Central African Republic, where I used to have a lot of friends who were missionaries. It's just been in chaos now for about half a decade.
And then you look at India and the crackdown there, and people are afraid. The Christians are afraid. I know people in India from New Zealand, missionary type positions. They have to be so careful what they say and so on. So it's really ramping up everywhere. John, we probably ought to look at closing up now, but I feel like it'd be really good to come back really soon and do another one of these because there's just so much more we could talk about.
There always is. It doesn't seem like we have any trouble with
we don't
filling up the hour, especially and I'm a talker. I used to get set out in the hall a lot when I was in grade school because I was always talking. So,
yeah, I mean, it's been really good, and I'm certainly glad we have, and we've stretched out a little bit longer than the hour and so on. But we've certainly everything that's been said was important, and so I'd be definitely keen to come back really soon and do another show. So thanks for being on today again, John. It's been really excellent.
Always good to see you. By the way, if I might just add, prophecy updates at the Fellowship Bible Chapel YouTube channel. You can still find them unless you're in restricted mode on YouTube. And then I'm going to be speaking in England November 16th through the 18th at the Moriel, MORIEL.org conference in the Midlands area of England. So if anybody's listening, they want to look up that conference, they can message me through Facebook or the church email address, fvchapel.com.
Well, maybe we should get you on here before you go another time, so John, in the next few weeks.
It's hard to get the time to work up the talks, I will tell you, because I want to stay current on everything, and I feel like if I don't look at something every day, that I'm going to fall way behind. So.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, but it's been great talking to you again, Tony. Love the time we spent together.
Thanks, John.
God bless.
Folks, don't forget, visit our website, aminutetomidnight.com, and bookmark our website if you haven't already done so, and follow it. And we have a forum as well on the website, which you're welcome to join. And we run A Minute to Midnight completely by donations, and we do appreciate the support. Which you can do that on our website as well, aminutetomidnight.com. And all of our shows are on YouTube, iTunes, and also on our website as audio only and video downloads. And don't forget to like this video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. That's it for this show. We'll catch you in another show in a few days' time. Until then, God bless, and this is Tony signing out.